let me show you something really interesting, right? So I decided, let me take a look at Netflix. So Netflix got on this weekly upside over here. The pullback ended. The long-term trend is still up. We had a downside pressure pattern fueled by this weekly negative divergence. So that played out, and this thing got a little long. And then support came underneath, and this thing just turned up. What's interesting is that the turn over here, if I pull up a weekly, daily, weekly combination, take a look at how the daily turned up, and then there was a pullback that didn't retest all the way, and that was able to change that weekly to the upside. And so we got onto an upside trend, right? Fueled by the quarterly, as I showed you here. So this whole thing pulls back to monthly. Monthly stays short, this thing stays long. We're in an uptrend. The weekly is pointing up with great force. Now, is this thing pulling back on what looks like weakness? Definitely. And this thing already suffered a pullback and continuation, so this is weakening. There's definitely a huge move to the downside coming up. But we were on the upside over here. This thing is weakening, and so it pulls back, fueled by this divergence on the 60. And then this tires. It gets tired, and you can see how the 15 is getting ready to upcycle. And this is the very same pattern that I traded on SPY that I got out early on the 204.50s, if you remember. See? Very same pattern. So everything was set for an upside in here. And so if you go take a look at the long-term picture here, the larger context, we had a pullback on the daily. But you see, what fuels the pullback on the daily is the strengthening of the time frames below it. Does this thing look like strengthening, or it looks like technicals are pulling along against the trend? Did we have a very clean upside pattern? No. What we had is a bunch of charts that just couldn't continue feeding the pullback against this trend on the weekly. And so what you have is the turn up onto strength. In other words, a continuation that now yields a downside pressure pattern on the daily. But based on this picture and taking a look at the daily, you can say we're bottoming below 103. The 105s definitely look in range. And even if they are not eclipsed, they will be severely affected by the upcoming move. So the 105 calls for something like Netflix that does not carry the same volumes as an index like SPY would be a good round number that would carry good volumes. Let me show you the options chain on Netflix. See the pyramiding over here on the dance floor? The 105 calls are now in the money. And they're 520 and 535 with a 15-cent spread, which is normal for something like Netflix. With that said, you pick Netflix here at the turn of the 5. That will give you the absolute certainty of the move to the upside. As I am analyzing this in real time here with you, I'm looking at the fact that the 15 turned up with this 5 minute right there. And then you have price retest. So in here or in here, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The entry, I put it at 10:42 a.m. on the 12th yesterday. Right there, that is 10:45. So 10:40, 10:42, 10:43, right around those areas on the 105s. So here's the 105 calls, April 16th, third week expiration on Netflix. Those options were 62 cents. On the first go here, You entered at 10:42. By 11:20, you are at 96% right here. That means that you have this pullback. But what's the 15-minute doing? Up. What's the hourly doing? Up. And if we pull in the daily and we go over here, the daily just turned up. No reason to panic and or get out. This thing is going to normally pull back. There's going to be a 1-minute pattern against you, so you let that play out. And then this thing continues. Take a look at that 15. And as the 15 gets with the program, you jump ship, because at the beginning of your trade, you could have said, I'm going to trade the up cycle on the 5. Although on this very move, you basically say to yourself, I'm going to trade the up cycle of the hourly. And you're going to bail basically on information given to you by the 15-minute weakening. So the 15 gets absolutely going. And by 2:45 p.m. yesterday, mind you, somewhere in this area, over here it came back down a little bit, you are already at 332%. But take a look at the absolute strength of that hourly. It makes me want to pull in the daily. The daily is absolutely going to the upside. So you let this guy pull back on this bullshit little pattern. It pulls back long, and by the end of the day, you are long on your technicals. The 60 couldn't be more strong to the upside. And what you have on opening is a gap up that continues to the upside. On the gap up on opening, you're at 577%, but you really have no pattern to speak of to turn that hourly. So I would probably be happy with the technical topping on the 5-minute, as I understand, and we understand because we have been studying this so much and so many times as of late, that this is establishing a ceiling on this price from which we're going to start bouncing back and forth as we create a platform by which we're going to undermine the 60. Now, mind you that the upside is extreme. However, the daily on opening today could have grown technically more to catch up to the price. It didn't. It's rather short. And if you pay attention to the details, this here is a downside pressure pattern, if not almost a divergence, which brings me to the 2 and 4 hour charts. This 4-hour chart is a negative divergence. See? And so we are already starting to change the context, which tells you you're there. This is the ceiling of that price. Now you have the first part of a divergence that's going to be created to undermine the 15. Look, the 15 has actually topped out, even without a good-looking 5-minute divergence, because this thing is like a geyser, and the price is just starting to crumble on itself. This is the moment, if not somewhere in between. But if you say to yourself, I'm just going to wait for the topping of that 5, and that's it, with a pattern in here, that understanding gives you this very top at 912%. Now, this is to be able to do this requires hundreds of analyses like the one I just did, and I've done them. My analysis of this nature is in the hundreds of exercises that I've done like this to understand the dynamic and correlation between timeframes and how they feed power or weakness to each other. And so that gives you this. But even if you fail to execute the very top over here, even if you did 577%, that's staggering. Even if you did 100%, that's awesome. If you did 200%, amazing. If you do 332%, stunning. 577%, amazing. 730%, 787%, pullback continuation, 912%. It really isn't difficult. And so all you need to do is understand the relationship that takes place on the release of power. You have a weekly chart that is really poised. You have a daily chart that pulls back on weakness. And you have a decaying hourly that just doesn't have it in itself to continue fueling more downside. It's done. It's throwing grapefruit. If you bring in the 2-hour at this particular point, is that hourly, or 2 hourly rather, not long? This type of pattern calls for huge upside. Now, what's interesting also about this pattern is that you would want to see like a good organized 15. You're not going to get it. And the reason you're not going to get it is because these larger time frames, like the 2 hour and the hourly, run out of steam. They just don't have enough energy to create a good looking pattern. And so you're going to get oftentimes just something like this. You just have to identify the cycling of the charts and say to yourself, this is long, the pullback is over, the context is huge upside, this thing will resume the trend. Because this thing can no longer feed upside. And so all you do is design your trade and say to yourself, I'm going to trade the upcycle of the 5 or the 15 or the hourly. I think in this case, you can assume the upcycle, at the very least the 15. If the 15 turns the hourly, then you jump it because the hourly is now on the upside. And so you jump ship and you say to yourself, I'm on this 60. How long? Well, I'm going to get on that 60 until the 15 tells me that it's done. This technical topping on the 5, as I just explained to you, gives you the ceiling. And I showed you why. Because now you have a negative pattern over here. And the fact that the daily on opening today didn't catch up to the price, that means that there's weakness building up in here. So the continuity of this price surge gets compromised. So that's how you say, you know, if anything, you jump back to the 5 minute and you say, I'm just going to stay in this 5 minute until it tops out. Because that topping of the 5, this is where it gets a little hazy for the beginners. That topping of the 5 gives you the point of reference by which a divergence will need to happen, or weakness, to top out that 15, which in turn is the beginning stages of a system of weakness that will come in here to undermine that hourly. Whether or not a good divergence will happen over here is irrelevant. You already robbed the bank with hundreds of % anywhere along these lines. You don't need to negotiate more. If you want more after this, that is just stupid greed. You need to get the hell out and call it a day. And as I'm doing this exercise, I'm thinking about you, Giancarlo, because you're my little man. You're the promise. You are the guy that's going to help me validate this thing and show the family that I did the right thing by turning you onto stocks at such an early time in your life. So here's yet a fantastically good-looking study that should make this thing incredibly clear for you. It's all about context. It's all about trend of the larger time frames, pullbacks, weaknesses that feed the continuity of the pullback and how they run out of steam. And then you bring in your knowledge about understanding the up and down cycles. The down cycle of the 15 is obviously ending. And you put that together with the 5 minute coming in here, creating support on the price. Is this not a very entrenched upside pressure pattern? And it's happening on this theater, on this context, weakening 15. The up cycle at this particular point in time is obvious. If not here, you let this technical bottom on the 5 establish a point of reference from which a divergence should be born or something similar, and you just say to yourself, I'm just waiting for the turn. And if anything, you say to yourself, I'm going to trade the absolute certain upcycle of the 5. I cannot show you the one because we don't go back that far. See over here? No, actually, I do have it. This is the one. Take a look at how the one really built up a pattern. As a matter of fact, since I have it in there, this is where it pays to have these tabs. You come in here and do a 1 and a 5 over here, just to put this thing together. Here's that moment. And obviously, we need to bring this back over here. Take a look at the gathering of upside support happening in here. See how this 1 minute is supporting the price. And it turns over here. It's obvious. And even if you hesitate a little bit at this particular juncture, take a look at the bottoming over here. That's just gathering strength, more strength, more strength, more strength, up, up, up. The up cycle of the 5 on the context that I just showed you is absolute, and it's absolutely imminent. And that's how you design your trade. You say to yourself, the context is good, the pullback is over, the weekly says upside, this thing has to upcycle. All of these guys have to upcycle. The pullback on the daily is over because we ran out of steam over here. This is from grapefruit. And that's how you bring together all your knowledge that you have been able to amass over the last 12 or maybe even 18 months. I don't know how long, but it's been a while. So I have this study for you. I made it with you and you only in mind. I saw this thing and I'm like, I want to make this video for Giancarlo. So I leave you with this. Isn't this beautiful? 100%, 200%, 300%, 500%, almost 600% on opening, then 730, 787, 9. This is a 900% return monster trade. And it goes together with the understanding of what's going on with SPY that had an upside divergence in here. It all coincides. This is how you use all of these guys together when you trade something important like a company like Netflix. I'll leave you with that.